Welcome, Army fans. This is Joe Iacono with a very special guest here on GBK today, offensive coordinator Cody Worley, who's been a guest on our program multiple times. Cody, I know we just talked about it, but believe it or not, spring ball is getting ready to start in in a little over or 1 week from today, if I'm not mistaken. And seemed like just the other day you guys were wrapping up your bowl victory over Louisiana Tech. So the football season never really ends. What are you excited about? Looking forward to spring ball, and kind of what's your number one objective as the OC in spring ball?
I mean, really, like always in this process, you're looking for growth and development. And we typically utilize spring to develop some of the unknowns at spots. Luckily, we do have some production that is returning. Guys like Noah Short, we know what he can do. We know what Brady Small and Paulo Generali can do. We know what Hayden Reed can do. Seeing Samari Howard function in the role that he did in the Independence Bowl was really good to see. Taking over and playing that slot position, and Hayden playing the full-time running back position, but really developing depth. And then the biggest question mark that I know everyone has is the quarterback position, and replacing the type of production that we got out of a really phenomenal player and a phenomenal year for Bryson Daly. So, I think developing the two deep and developing guys that are kind of unknown that maybe were on the scout team last year or at times were up with us during practices is the biggest thing, because this is the largest transition phase, or the biggest gains that you see, because guys have gotten in the weight room, they've gone through the fourth quarter program, they kind of know what to expect. So really just evaluating those guys and building depth, but also really filling in question marks at several positions.
Great. And let's break some of that down for starters. And we'll start, like you said, for the fan base, the biggest thing on everybody's mind, of course, is the quarterback position and having to replace Bryson Daly's production. I know the same type of production probably won't come from just the quarterback position. And you probably got to spread that around with the younger quarterbacks that we have coming up, Dwayne Coleman, Washington and Helms, just to name a few from the start. So that's kind of my first question, I guess, is what does the Cody Worley Army offense look like under potentially each of those guys versus how it looked with the unique player that Bryson was? Obviously, all the kind of pejoratives that they threw out there, full, quarterback in a fullback's body, his ability to
Absolutely.
always get the short yardage, the ability to run power. What differences can the fan base expect to see this year, depending who's under center? And I'm sure they all have their own set of strengths. So maybe if you want to walk us through that a little bit, and then
Sure.
maybe what the offense looks like with potentially each one of the three leaders for the quarterback position.
I think, following every season, we do a pretty extensive evaluation of not only the plays and the things that we did systematically in X's and O's, but also the returning personnel that we have. So evaluating that personnel, no one is Bryson Daly, and that's what I've communicated to those guys. They don't need to feel like they need to be Bryson Daly. They need to be themselves. And each of those guys have strengths and weaknesses that they will continue to progress with throughout the spring. But I'm really excited about those guys. And then the addition of getting Zach Mundell back. He got injured in the spring game last year and missed the entire season with a medical. So getting him back, and he had a phenomenal spring. He really probably would have went into the fall as the two coming out of the spring. So I don't know what condition he'll be in, but hopefully we get him for practices. But really, with those three guys you mentioned, to start with Dwayne Coleman, we've seen glimpses of what he can do. He started and won the Air Force game and did what he needed to do in that game to be successful. And I trust Dwayne, and the guys around him trust him. And he's a player that we can count on. And he's got to continue to progress in some areas and continue to progress with his ability to run the offense. And some of the things that even in that game that we utilized with him were somewhat different. I think we have a system, and that system, you kind of evolve to what you have personnel wise, and a lot of it has to do with the trigger man. So, creating within the system and the confines of the system while also doing research and adding things and evolving like every offense does every year is really what is the strengths of the quarterback and playing to his strengths. And that's one thing that I thought we did a really good job of was playing to
Yeah.
Bryson's strengths. So we're going to attempt to do the same thing. We're not going to be a revamped Army offense, with the success that we had, but we certainly understand that, that position is the most critical position on the offense, and playing to those guys' strengths is critical. And all of them have shown, capabilities of really being able to handle the workload. And I'm really excited to see the progress, especially a guy like Ethan Washington and Kel Helms. They're guys that are somewhat unknown. Ethan Washington was phenomenal as a freshman during fall camp. And, he was on the travel squad and got to really experience what it's like to be on the travel squad, even as a backup. And didn't really get to play, didn't get any experience, but I'm really excited about his growth and potential. I think he's a really talented kid, but he's young and needs to progress. And then Kel Helms, in a lot of ways, has you can see some of that maturation and progression going on right now. When you go into the quarterback room and number 13 is not sitting in there, there's a sense of urgency with those guys, and they
Hmm.
understand what's at hand and the opportunity. So I'm anxious to see those guys compete and see how they progress and see what this offensive unit within the confines of what we do looks like with them under center, and really evolving to their strengths and playing on their strengths.
And with, coming off of last year, would you say right now it's a pretty wide open competition between the four of them, or based on Dwayne's experience and game experience, does he have any kind of a lead going into the clubhouse or anything like that?
I told them that somebody has to take the first snap in practice, in spring practice. But for a lot of positions, it's wide open competition, especially at that position. Nothing is given, everything is earned. And those guys, what I want out of the spring, and the competition may bleed into fall camp. I don't know what that's going to look like until we really get into it. But if we started practice, when we start practice on Thursday, Dwayne Coleman will take the first snap with the ones. But each of those guys will get their respective reps with each unit, and evaluating, their progression and what that looks like is critical in those 15 practices and their development in the meeting room and walkthroughs as well. So like a lot of positions in the spring, unless you have an incumbent guy, like we know what Brady Small
Brady
is,
Small, I was going to say. That's
right? Like we know who the center is.
yeah,
We know what Noah Short can do. We know what Paulo Generali can do. We know what Hayden Reed, and he's got to progress it. I was really impressed with how he handled the bowl game. He hadn't practiced at the running back position in weeks.
wow,
So he's really talented, and I'm really excited about him. He's a different player than even a Kanye. He's much more versatile with what we can do with him. And you kind of saw that with his ability to play the slot position. That's some of
yeah.
the versatility that you now have with him at the running back position. But really, every position this is competition phase for us. I want to see what some of the young guys can do. I want to see how they respond when they're with the one offense going against the one defense, and mixing and matching what that looks like with different combinations and seeing what guys can do. And that's really what this phase is for. But to answer your question, long-winded, I mean, it's going to be a competition. Like I said, when we start practice, Dwayne Coleman, I think, has earned the right to take the first snap. But that job is not going to be given. That's got to be earned, and that's even going into last year and years past. It was a competition even with Bryson. So
Yeah.
those guys understand that, and they understand the opportunity at hand. And I'm really excited to see how guys respond.
Good stuff. And you mentioned, kind of, I'm going to go through kind of all the major position groups, or whatever we can cover in the next 18 minutes. But Hayden Reed, you mentioned, we got to see what he can do in the bowl game, as kind of the feature running back. And you mentioned a little bit about what he can do. Extremely versatile skill set, really good blocker, good catching passes out of the background, great runner. You could talk a little bit more about him, but also Jake Rendina in that position as well,
Yep.
who's kind of the power back. And then we got to see Carson Smith a couple times in the bowl game as well. So talk a little
That's
bit
right.
about Jake and Carson, and a little bit about
Yeah.
that position, which is also critical to your offensive success.
So, obviously Jake served a role and understood his role and responsibilities, and he's continued to embrace his role and getting better, to be really to become more of an every down scenario back. He was kind of your change up, and he would get his carries here and there to keep people honest, and he was effective when he did. He's much different. Like you said, he's 260 pounds and built like a truck. So it gives you a different dimension than even like a Hayden Reed. It's a change of pace. And I can assure you, tackling Jake Rendina in the fourth quarter is going to be really difficult. And utilizing that skill set and him continuing to get better with just his fundamental assignments in the blocking game, pass protection, etc. And then really excited about Carson. Carson is not a guy that when you see him strikes you as this phenomenal skill set running back, but he's very effective with what we do. And he's always a guy that pushes the pile. He's got phenomenal contact balance. He finds ways of breaking tackles and protecting his hip. And, there's always ways he falls forward. We give him the ball, and all of a sudden it's 1st and 10, and you look up and it's 2nd and 5, and he just has that capability. But with a lot of things, he'll need to progress with his game mentally and fundamentally, so he can be also an every down back, where it's every time a certain player comes into the game, you know what to expect. So we want to be able to utilize those three guys and really see what some of the young guys can do. The guy that comes to mind is Briggs Bartosh. He was a freshman, started out at the slot position, but has gained some weight. Really versatile player coming out of high school, really fast, change of pace, more in the Hayden Reed mold than the Jake Rendina mold. So excited to see his progression. But we're also getting some players that we haven't seen at that position, getting some guys back. Jarrell Dixon is back. He was,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. So having him back in the fold, I thought
Mhm.
he had a pretty good spring. He's got some multi-positional value as well. But really, it's an opportunity in the spring to move guys around and see what they can do at different spots. That's kind of what we did with Hayden Reed, going into the season, and he became one of our best slots. And then you had, Kanye, obviously. So getting the best 11 on the field is critical, but having some multi-positional things going on in spring, I think, is healthy, and seeing same thing with the offensive line. There may be guys. Paolo may take reps at tackle, and see
Okay.
what he can do there. We've got a guy, Will Jeffcoat, who will
Mhm.
kind of replace Bill Katsianis in the guard
Okay.
box, but played significant snaps last year and showed a lot of promise. I think he's very similar to Bill. Really strong, people mover, gritty, tough. So I expect that position not to take a major drop off at all in the guard box, but replacing guys like Lucas Scott and Connor Finucane. That will be a big question mark in the spring. We've had guys like Henry Appleton, who has shown a lot of promise, really athletic, has gained weight. He's really strong in the weight room. But seeing how he progresses in the spring with his limited reps in the fall, but very promising. He's very talented. And then other guys, Lane Parks will be in the fold. Briggs's brother Braden Bartosh will be in the fold, but there's also a lot of young guys that are unknown at the offensive line position, that will hopefully can play multiple positions and give us some the value and see how we can get the best five on the field. But those two positions, and I can just kind of roll through if you'd like me to,
Yeah, go
with
ahead.
every
That's
position.
people
Yeah, I
rather hear
mean,
you talk than me. So
um,
go for it.
yeah.
Just roll
So
through, because that's what I'm going to ask anyway. So just go for
yeah,
it.
I assumed as much. I can give you the rundown, but At the tight end position, Parker Pulaski really keeping him healthy was critical. Last year, he battled through some injuries, but really talented, different skill set. Can give us some versatility on the perimeter, and he's also a dog in the box. So he's really stepped up into that role as a leader, and he's the assumed guy at that position. But young, we have a really good crop
You have a
of
huge
young.
crop of tight ends. If you look at the roster,
Absolutely.
I don't
Yeah.
know if any team in the country has as many tight ends as Army. So what do
Well,
you got there?
with the transition, and as much as we play with tight ends, it was a major emphasis going into the last two cycles to recruit a true versatile tight end, not just all right, he's really an offensive lineman, but we're going to put him in an eligible jersey, or he's really a receiver, but he's not fast enough. Like we wanted to make sure that we recruited tight ends. And so, we put a major emphasis and premium on that position, and then seeing what those guys can do in the spring to really create a three deep. Some of the one of the guys that was up with us, Tex Brandon, he showed a lot of promise, and he's done a phenomenal job in the month of fourth quarter warrior and in the weight room. But he shows a lot of promise, but a lot of those guys are unknown. So we'll find out what they can do. But from a length, from a skill set, from a size standpoint, and the numbers in that room, we'll have plenty to develop and see what that looks like. But I'm really excited about Parker, really excited about Tex Brandon. And then hopefully some guys emerge at that position and can challenge at that position. Replacing Casey Reynolds' production at the wide
Yeah,
receiver position will be critical. One of the guys that stands out is Toby Alawale. So, had a really good freshman season, made some splash plays, battled some injuries last year, and really couldn't get
I
over the
was going to
hump.
ask you, Cody, if he had been hurt last year because I used
Yeah,
to see a lot more of him last year. So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, he battled ongoing injuries throughout the season, and then once he got healthy, we had a really good rotation with what we had. So having Casey and Liam Fortner and even Cam Sure kind of stepped into the third role as a viable guy that could get you 15, 20 snaps, guy you could trust, really good hands, knew the offense, knew his role and responsibilities, but Toby is a guy that has that type of threat talent. And he's a guy that people are going to be afraid of. So he, to me, between Liam continuing to develop, and we know what he is. I mean, he's a dog, he's the assassin, but continuing to progress in the pass catching ability and really being an every down receiver that we can count on and get production out of. And he's a guy that I trust that can do that. We targeted Casey a majority of the time for the right reasons,
right,
but
right.
Liam is a guy that can do those things as well, and he's different than Casey, but he has the ability to do those things. But Toby is a guy that we've got to maximize in the spring and get the most out of, and he's really transitioned his mindset. He's been incredible in the off-season program thus far. So I'm really excited to see his growth. I think he learned a lot of valuable lessons last season, and he's anxious to get back out there and has a sense of urgency with how he's approached things. So I'm really excited about him. And then there's some young guys. I mean, you go through some of those guys at the wide receiver position. KP Pointer played sparingly last year in some mop up duty, but has the ability to be a good wide receiver with what we do, and really buying in and understanding his role and responsibility. And then young guys like Brady Anderson, he's a guy that has shown a lot of promise and physical, can run, good route runner, good hands, kind of fits the mold of what you're looking for as a complete wide receiver with what we do. But excited about that position to see who kind of takes over the reins of taking over the production that Casey was able to have this past season as a viable weapon, and people that, defenses knew where Casey Reynolds was. So adding to that, and having more threats in the pass game will open up a lot of things that we can do. So but Toby is a highlight, and we know who he is. We know what he's capable of. We just got to maximize, and he's got to continue to progress, but really excited about him. And then the slot position, Noah Short, incredible season, will continue. He'll be a target guy. He'll be a guy that will carry much more of a load, especially with the absence of Bryson. He's a guy that we got to get the ball to more, and that's a significant
That's
push with him.
from the subscribers at GBK. That's probably the number one. If there's a knock on the Army offense, it's like, man, can we get the ball to Short on the perimeter more? And it's just like,
Absolutely. You take some of the strengths that we had from the quarterback run game and the efficiency there. But Noah is a guy that can break the game open, and we've got to find ways. And some of the things that we've already kind of discussed as a staff, but he's got to be an impact player at multiple positions and how we get him the ball. So really excited about him and his growth. But the guys at that position behind Noah, David Clerk showed up in some games. He's tremendous speed. He was a 10-5 kid in high school.
wow.
But continuing to progress with his game, but keeping him healthy and excited about him. Trey Benson is another slot. Samari Howard played significant amount of snaps, but Samari can really function at either of the slot positions. He has a lot of versatility at those slot positions. So, feel good about the growth there. Young kids, Jaden Walker, JP Walker is a kid that has shown promise. Highly touted rusher out of Texas, out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He was a direct freshman, so he's on the scout team, but he's shown a lot of promise with his ability as well. And then we've got some guys returning at the slot position that we're trying to find the best two deep that we can find, and getting the best 11 on the field is the most important. And in the bowl game, you saw a lot of Noah and Samari Howard together.
Yep.
And, that was a great combination because they both have the skill set to, we can pitch the ball to Samari. We can throw the ball to Samari. Samari's a good lead blocker. Same thing with Noah. Noah didn't get enough credit with his lead blocking ability because he was such a target guy. But he also functions really well in that capacity as well. So it keeps defenses off balance, having the
I
opportunity.
forget who y'all were playing. It was a home game. It was one of the October games where you blew somebody out. It was like East Carolina or UAB or somebody, and Bryson had a run, or Kanye did, and he made a block on the perimeter. It was just awesome that sprung
Yeah.
it, went to the end zone. So
Yeah, he takes a lot of pride in that, and he gets a lot of credit for his explosiveness and his ability as a pass catcher and a guy that we can get the ball to in the run game. But he takes a lot of pride in his blocking as well, and that's the mantra and their goal in that room. It's those guys work for each other. So having the best combination, but excited about the guys at the position. That's a position where it's a good problem to have. There may not be enough balls to
yeah.
go around. That's great. So the more depth we have and the guys we feel good about getting the football, that's great for us and what we can do. And it takes pressure off those quarterbacks, finding ways to get Noah the ball in space or in the pass game and utilizing the slots, and how dynamic I think that group can be, as well as a guy like Hayden Reed in that running back position. They'll carry a little bit more of the load, obviously, with an unproven or a young quarterback in the fold. Maybe not young, but just not a lot of production and game
Right.
reps.
Yeah.
But overall, with the returners that we have back, with the depth that we've built going into the spring, now it's just seeing what it's going to look like through their progression and their development in practice and meetings and in the weight room, et cetera. But I'm excited about it. I really am. I'm really excited about this spring. I'm always excited when, the quarterback position and what that's going to look like. And the unknown, I think, is good, and it's something that we'll assess in the spring and see what that looks like from a skill set and find the best ways to be successful, move the ball, score points, and hopefully continue to progress at every position.
So you mentioned, the that one of your primary goals in spring is to develop the young guys and develop depth. And you kind of went through some of the personnel on the O line, but really of the starters on the returning Joe Moore award-winning offensive line, we only have Brady and Paolo, and the other three positions need to be replaced. And you mentioned Jeff Coat and Appleton and a couple other guys. One of the things that made that line so successful last year, and this was mentioned in a number of broadcasts, was just the way you guys kind of got blessed on your health. That pretty much the same five guys started every game, which is super unusual in the offensive line.
That's right.
So depth is going to be a key factor this year. Who are some of those younger plebes that maybe you're looking to develop that might see some playing time this year that, and do you have a goal to have really 10 guys up front that can go in at any time and really not see a drop off in performance much? I mean, I know there's going to be some, but
Yeah, yeah. A guy that I'm really excited about is Lane Parks. Last season, he played center guard and tackle, so he gives us a lot of flexibility. Maybe not extensive game reps, but he's shown promise at those positions. He's lost some weight, so having the flexibility of playing the tackle position is a possibility. Like you said, replacing Connor and Lucas will be a challenge, but there are guys that, a Ned Brady, who's going to be a senior, who, like a lot of times here at West Point, you have that senior who emerges as a guy that may end up being a starter or he plays significant amount of snaps in a backup role. We've seen that with Cam Sure, with Casey to a certain degree. And over the years at a lot of different positions, even offensively and defensively, sometimes the development process here takes a little bit longer. But Ned Brady is a guy that can function at the tackle position, and has done a really good job in the offseason. I think he's a guy that could be in the fold there. Tyler Lee is a guard that really has some flexibility and really athletic. He's strong and again has shown promise there. And then the backup center position is Kyle Kloska. His brother is also on the team as well as a running back, but he's done a phenomenal job to where, he could service not only as a backup center, but maybe in a guard role as well in the guard box to give us some flexibility. But, the unknown guys are a lot of those guys were freshmen this past season. So seeing who emerges of that freshman group that we don't really know a ton about. But the guys that were up with us last year, Brandon Rawstad was a tackle that was up with us at times and also with the scout team, really athletic tackle, needs to continue to progress, but shows promise. But really, those are the guys that stand out. I mentioned Braden Bartosh. He's a guard. So finding out who that top five, and like you said, we want to have a two deep. Because it's very rare that you go through a season like we did last season where you have that chemistry and the same five guys start every game. It's very rare to happen. So we've got to build that depth, and I feel good about the guys that we have to do that with and see their progression. But the biggest challenge will be finding the best five who give us the best opportunity to be successful.
And last question for you, Cody, because we're out of time. Unfortunately, I could talk to you for hours, but you got things
Yeah,
to do, as do I. So last question. You mentioned Noah Short and his speed and everything else, and we know that he was moved over from the defensive side of the ball. One question some of our readers had
sure.
is, speaking of speed, has any thought been given to moving Jackson Hammond over to the offensive side of the ball to play slot back and get him on the field?
So it's always a joke because, I mean, him winning the Patriot League and his track speed and those things. And, it's a joke in the office. He's progressed as a corner, and I think he will be in the mix. But as we go through spring, like you've seen, it's part of our responsibility to find out, all right, if this guy isn't going to help us on defense or he's not going to be in the two deep and be a travel guy, but we see promise at another position, this is a great opportunity to do that. I can't make any promises, but it has just like the viewers, it's been
It's
discussed
been
and
brought up.
it's been joked around.
Joked about. Okay, good.
Anytime you have a guy that runs a 10-4 100 meter,
Yeah.
you find a way. But he's progressed and showed promise at the corner position, and we'll see what that looks like once we get into spring and get out of spring. But certainly has been discussed.
Okay. I have to interview Coach Woody in the next week or so, so hopefully he won't beat me up too bad for asking that question. But
Yeah.
thanks a ton for your time, Cody. Really appreciate it. And I think it's an exciting time for the Army offense. The fans are super excited to see what'll happen in spring ball, and then as we head into obviously the summer and the fall. So thanks a ton for your time. Army fans, this has been Joe Iacono with GoBlackKnights.com, along with Army offensive coordinator Cody Worley, saying, "Go Army, beat Navy."